Okay, we started chapter 29 discussing spatial resolution. Now we're going to discuss contrast resolution of the digital image. You should already know the difference between subject contrast, meaning variation in tissue densities existing within the body, and image contrast, or the difference between dark and light areas on the final radiograph. This is just going to review how subject contrast affects attenuation of the beam. You know that bone is going to attenuate the beam more than gas, so you'll get greater radiation on the detector where gassy areas exist in the body. I'm going to go on a little tangent real quick, just because you happen to see a lot of techs getting lazy out there and they don't adjust technical factors, like ever. You have to consider subject contrast when you plan to use optimum radiographic technique. What do I mean by that? Let's just say two people walk into your department for lumbar spine x-rays. A 35-year-old male football player who tweaked his back at last night's game. And the other person is a 90-year-old female who felt a twinge when she leaned down to pour food in her cat's bowl. Sure, you can use the preset L-spine technique for both of those patients. But your goal is to obtain the highest quality image with the lowest radiation dose possible. You know that the big football player has higher tissue density in muscle, bone, and anatomical thickness than this nice little old lady. Those attributes of the football player are going to attenuate more of the X-ray beam when compared to the 90-pound soaking wet great-grandmother. So the very minimum you should do is hike up the KVP for the man and be sure to collimate to clean up scatter. That's another thing that you don't see people doing much of these days. I don't mean to get into specifics about technical factor selection too much here. There's a whole other class for that. But the point is, the data received by the image receptor, which comes from the remnant beam, has a limited ability to be manipulated by the software in the finished image. So you'll have better diagnostic images if you can provide a good signal to the detector as opposed to a limited amount of signal with a lower KVP in that particular situation for the football player. Think of it like nighttime photography. Have you ever taken a picture on your cell phone in low light settings? Chances are the signal's not great. You're probably going to have a lot of blur, a lot of image noise. The same thing can happen with X-rays. If you get garbage in to the detector, you're going to get garbage out of the system. Provide it with optimum exposure. You'll see the digital equipment provides some amazing work as long as you give it a good signal, but you must take into consideration the variation each patient brings in order to manipulate your technical factors to send the system a great sample. I'm off my soapbox now. Please make sure you understand how subject contrast and image contrast are related, though. Also, the percent of original X-ray absorbed by the patient is referred to as the attenuation coefficient. It's affected by subject contrast and tissue density, but can also be influenced by the technical factors you select. Don't just be a button pusher. All right, when you think of a pixel, it's flat, and the voxel simply adds a third dimension to compose the volume element. In CT, we consider slice thickness, where there's a bit depth and voxel that's also deep. We also have more shades of gray to form image reconstructions. You'll get into the weeds of this in the Principles of CT course. Just now know that a voxel is a three-dimensional area. All right, contrast resolution is the ability to distinguish between similar tissues and image them. You can see the image of the shoulder on the top has a higher contrast resolution. You're able to see differences in tissue densities around the muscles, surrounding the bone, variations in lung detail, and the image is more black and white when compared to the lower image. Digital imaging is great because you can manipulate the image post-processing to change the contrast resolution without re-exposing the patient to more X-rays. Post-processing can change both brightness and contrast to allow you to see things you couldn't normally with old film screen radiography. Subject contrast is just the tissue density variation. Image contrast is the computer software ability to adapt the display contrast. The chest has high subject contrast. The mediastinum is composed of bone and muscle compared to the adjacent tissue of the lungs containing mostly air. The abdomen has much lower subject contrast. If you note the tissue density between bone, intestine, and muscle when compared to the chest. Old film screen systems used to require about a 10% variation in density or exposure. Density is what we used to call the darkness of the image, in order to see a visible difference. This was mainly controlled with the KVP used at the control panel, and the type of film used also made a difference. Digital systems can visualize as low as 1% difference between tissue densities. That's huge. Take it from someone who was trained on film screen systems, who has watched the technology evolve over the years. Procedural algorithms aren't necessarily covered in your book, and we don't cover them in detail in this class, but there are some terms you may be familiar with and that we'll definitely discuss later. All you need to know right now is that an algorithm is simply a set of instructions for the data received. In other words, algorithms are designed to display the image in a specific way, and we'll get to some examples of those later in the course. Let's talk about windowing the digital image. Sometimes you may hear the terms window and level the image. This refers to manipulating the brightness and contrast post-processing. You probably see or do this every day in the hospital. To be more specific, the proper terms are window level and window width. Window level refers to adjusting the image brightness. Window width refers to adjusting the image contrast. If you increase the window level, that makes your image darker. Increasing the level number decreases brightness, and decreasing the level increases brightness. Increasing the window width widens the grayscale. This allows more grays to be displayed, provides a longer dynamic range, we say, which decreases contrast to a more kind of grayed out looking image. Decreasing the window width shortens the grayscale, which provides a shorter dynamic range, which increases contrast to a more black and white looking image. Again, window level controls brightness, window width controls contrast. You will keep hearing these terms throughout the program, but it's a good idea to get it down early. You will need to know the difference between a workstation and a display station. A workstation is what the radiologist is using to diagnose images. Big differences here. They have extremely high resolution. Patient info can be added or deleted, and changes can be permanently saved. The images can also be manipulated to a higher degree here. A display station is basically just used for viewing and typically has lower resolution with limited capabilities for image manipulation and quality. These aren't used to diagnose images as a result. We'll eventually discuss what you can and can't do at the technologist's monitor in the X-ray room. There are some changes that you can make prior to sending the images to PACS, and where the radiologist will read the image, that can severely degrade the image and prevent them from seeing what they need to see. But essentially, just remember not to manipulate the image prior to sending it to PACS. This can remove data from the image set that would normally allow the radiologist to use their superior viewing systems, their more expensive monitors and software, to see more than you can at the console on your low resolution monitor. We'll definitely cover more on that later.